The world reconciles itself to President Trump's tariff reality, the higher price to sell into America. Who pays? Who suffers? Who gains? Jasmine Crockett fled Texas in 2021 as a member of the Texas legislature to block voting restrictions. Now, she's in Congress amid a big fight over redistricting and joins us. Buy now and pay later, the alluring way to shed credit cards and credit scores. We explore the upsides and the risks. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. The new world order of tariffs is falling into place. President Trump contends this is a death knell, and a welcome one, he would argue, for a free trade regime that took root after World War II and knitted together previously disconnected and sometimes hostile nations into an informal global consortium exchanging goods and services at prices that did not have to account for protective U.S. tariffs. That lack of protection, the president is convinced, deindustrialized America and hollowed out its ability to make products here. This amounted, the president argues, to a form of slow economic suicide. There's a lot of debate about that, but that's what he believes. The president's prescribed remedy, tariffs, well, that has been entering the U.S. and global economic bloodstream in small drips for months. It will now be mainlined with unknown consequences for jobs, prices, and new manufacturing. Inventories enlarged to dodge tariffs have largely been sold down. Job creation right now is tepid. And pledges of trillions of dollars in investment in America to sidestep tariffs, well, those are mostly press releases, at least for now. And of course, they are subject, as ever, to reevaluation. In late July, the Budget Lab at Yale University pegged the average U.S. tariff rate at 19.3%. The last time it was even double digits was 1970, when it was 10%. The average U.S. tariff rate hasn't been near 20% since 1948. When 1% of American households had a television and a gallon of gas cost 26 cents. Those are bygone times, but the economic mindset that for decades preceded it, that tariffs meant economic protection and therefore economic vitality, even at the expense of conflicts, higher prices, and government favoring this industry or that company, well, that has come roaring back. Tariffs, first a shudder, now an economic roar, are here. And today is when they became more clear and more real than ever. To help us navigate this new landscape, we turn, as ever, gratefully, to Kelly O'Grady in New York. Kelly, take it away.
I know. I feel like, Major, we've been talking about this day. It is finally here. It was August 1st. Now it's August 7th. You know, I think let's level set where we were, because we did have tariffs in place leading up to this, that pause while the negotiations or non-negotiations were happening. So you go from 10% on most countries to more, sometimes significant. And I think we have a chart that shows some of sort of the most interesting ones. The EU ramps up to a 15% tariff that was negotiated in a deal. South Korea and Japan also at 15% with a deal. You see India on there. 25% of that 50% went into effect today. Another 25% would come into effect in 3 weeks. That is because they are buying Russian oil. The president wants to use economic pressure to stop that, and a couple of others. But I think, how is this all going to impact you and me as consumers? It's really going to depend on how businesses deal with that. Are they going to be able to continue absorbing these tariff costs as we have seen them do in the past? And we have seen the result of that hitting companies' bottom line during earnings season. Or how much are they going to pass on to us?
And yesterday, the president said something I'd like you to help us evaluate, Kelly, that microchips not made in America would be subject to a tariff of up to 100%, if I have that correct. But if there was a pledge to build in the country, in our country, then they could sidestep that. But that, I learned today, has a lot of legal hurdles, and there may be exemptions in there. Very, very fuzzy.
It is. And this is a really interesting one. So just step back reminder, semiconductor chips, I mean, they are in everything from your electronics, your phone, to electric vehicles, to MRI equipment. And if you were to see a 100% tariff, you're right on that, those would likely go up. in price, whether it's services or goods that you and me buy. The interesting thing, though, that the president said as he was standing next to Apple CEO Tim Cook, who was pledging more investment into the United States, is that if companies were going to make those chips here, and he argues it is for a national security reason because they're a big driver of the AI industry, most of them are made in Taiwan right now, that these companies would not face a tariff. We don't have the specifics behind it. On the one hand, that's a really good way to beat out your competition if they aren't making those investments. And you can see some of the big ones on the screen that have committed to investing: NVIDIA, Samsung, TSMC. But on the flip side, Major, I do wonder what that means for those upstart companies, those startups that are trying to make it, that aren't necessarily going to be able to pledge that investment. So you might see more market power consolidated into those bigger companies. But it is an interesting model. I've heard a lot of investors hope that that pledge could be transferred over to other industries like auto companies if they pledge to make investments here.
And then the question, who gains, who loses, and how much the government is controlling that outcome will loom very, very large. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so very much. The Kremlin says President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to meet in the coming days. President Trump said yesterday there's, quote, a good chance that he'll meet with Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky soon. There's not a lot of definition here. The White House has not announced a location. The president has given Russia until tomorrow, significantly, to reach a peace deal or at least make some progress toward a ceasefire. And if it doesn't, dire economic consequences in the form of sanctions, he says, will follow. Olivia Rinaldi joins me now from the White House. So yesterday was kind of a shock to the system, Olivia, and today we were hoping to find more definition, more detail. Did we?
Not particularly, Major. We woke up this morning to the news from Russia, actually, and a Kremlin aide that said there's actually a venue set and the two leaders are making arrangements to meet. Now, the White House was pretty quick to deny, saying there's no venue and there's no date that they've agreed to yet, but the president is still open to meeting with Russian President Putin. Just a short while ago in the Oval Office as well, President Trump said that Russian President Putin does not need to meet with President Zelensky before he meets with Putin. There was some reporting about that earlier today. The president said, no, I'm open to meeting with Putin regardless of a meeting with Zelensky. So this appears to be moving pretty quickly after Special Envoy Witkoff was in Moscow yesterday meeting with Putin. He came back and he told the White House that it was largely productive, that they felt like they were actually getting some concrete details about what's needed to bring this war to an end, at least from the Russian side, meaning what they'd be willing to give up to see this war end. And that seemed to have spurred all of this really quick movement and negotiations between the White House and the Kremlin on trying to get these two in a room. But the whole point of having this leader-level visit would be, once that happens, there's a deliverable. And that deliverable is either a ceasefire or the president wants a complete and total ceasefire and end to this war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Fox Business yesterday said there's still a lot of work they need to do before they even get there. So a lot of questions around this very shaky potential summit that doesn't have a date yet.
Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much. I appreciate it. CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd joins me now. Sam, you are familiar with this process of building toward deliverables, about what needs to go into it. Like I said yesterday, it was a shock to the system, not suggesting it was an unwelcome shock, but it just seemed like things were moving in a sort of unexpected way toward a settlement or a ceasefire or something. But it feels, as Olivia just indicated to us, like a lot of groundwork has to be laid down first.
It sure does. And if President Trump meets with President Putin before that groundwork is done, we're going to have a photo op that only serves Russia's interest. I've staffed presidential meetings with President Putin. We know that President Putin wants to be welcomed back onto the world stage and not treated like a pariah. And he wants a photo op with President Trump. What the Trump administration has said they want is some kind of ceasefire. And while we have this diplomatic path underway, Major, we also do have a pressure campaign. As you were discussing with Kelly earlier in the show, it is true that President Trump has imposed additional tariffs on India, the second largest buyer of Russian oil exports, because of Russia sending oil to India and that fueling part of Russia's war effort. So we have more pressure being put on by the Trump administration, ostensibly a diplomatic track leading up to a summit.
And Zelensky himself sounds at least nominally optimistic. And he has domestic political pressures building within Ukraine to try to resolve this, if possible, as well.
He sounds optimistic, but we do also have to keep in mind that when President Zelensky didn't sound optimistic in the Oval Office several months ago, I think you and I were on air together, he more than got his hand slapped. He was humiliated on the world stage. President Trump and his administration took steps to freeze assistance to Ukraine. And I think President Zelensky is aware that he has to play the game publicly a bit if he's ultimately going to get what he wants from the United States. It will be telling to see if President Trump continues with his deadline, which is tomorrow, for Russia to agree to a ceasefire, or if he just extends that indefinitely until there's a summit. If that's the case, Putin's plan of just stalling things is going to continue working.
Sam, I want to turn your attention to another part of the world and something the Israeli prime minister told to Fox News today, very specific about his intention and Israel's intention to go into Gaza and to stay, and to be, if not an occupying force, a force to eradicate Hamas and take control of that enclave. The Jordanians protested. Hamas obviously protested. Other voices in the Middle East probably will as well evaluate.
Well, just domestically within Israel, we have to take a step back and ask who really wants this. There's a large majority of the Israeli population that is against such a move. There's also the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff who's advising against fully occupying Gaza. Number one, the Israeli military is really strained and drained after several years of war in Gaza after Hamas's brutal terrorist attack. There are also concerns that a full occupation of Gaza, really taking over the remaining 25% that the IDF doesn't currently occupy, could lead to the hostages being killed. However, the ultranationalists in Netanyahu's coalition do want him to be more aggressive in Gaza. So a lot of domestic political dynamics for Netanyahu.
And that very fate of coalition may hinge on whether or not those right-wing ultranationalist members are satisfied with Netanyahu's approach in Gaza, whatever the risks might underlie that. Sam Vinograd, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Next on the Takeout, Texas Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The state's redistricting battle, her memories of fleeing Austin in 2021, and her advice now. Also, artificial intelligence abetting cyber crimes. We explore the battle of large language models and deep fakes in cyberspace. Buy now, pay later loans. By one estimate, these transactions accounted for $340 billion in global commerce last year. We look at the generational attractiveness of dodging credit cards. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. A Texas Senate committee today on a party line vote advanced the state's redistricting map. Also, the state's Attorney General Ken Paxton launched an investigation into a George Soros-backed political action committee for assisting Democratic lawmakers who have left the state to deny a quorum to slow that redistricting process down. Earlier, I spoke to Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Texas Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett joins me now. Congresswoman, my audience is pretty thoroughly dialed in on this Texas redistricting battle. So I want to go through, if I could with you, your hierarchy of concerns. Number one, how concerned or not concerned are you about what Senator John Cornyn said today, that the FBI has granted his request to go hunt down members of the Texas legislature who are not in Texas?
Oh, it's absolutely concerning. Obviously, this is not a federal issue. This is absolutely a state issue, as these are state lawmakers, number one. Number two, there's a lot of things that our FBI could be doing, such as keeping us safe, instead of doing the bidding of a corrupt president who has decided that he doesn't want any accountability, and he knows that the persons within his party are not willing to hold him accountable. And honestly, frankly, it is so concerning that this came from John Cornyn. Now, a Ted Cruz doing this, that sounds on brand, but John Cornyn is not this guy. I will tell you that I honestly have the utmost respect for John Cornyn. He has been a good partner when it comes to working on legislation. We have always put Texas first. So the idea that it's now Texas last and it's whatever the orange orangutan wants him to do is really sad that he would get to this point in his career and then decide that he would start to kind of play the political games.
The orange orangutan, I believe, is your reference to the President of the United States?
Yes.
Understood. Just wanted to clarify. How concerned or not concerned are you, Congresswoman Crockett, about efforts to expel members of the Democratic caucus in the state legislature?
Oh, I'm not concerned at all.
Why?
It doesn't concern me that they are trying to do this because obviously I was a part of the quorum break in 2021. And so when I participated in that quorum break, there were various things that they tried to submit to the Supreme Court at that time. And the Texas Supreme Court at that time, which for the most part has the same makeup as it did in 2021, it specifically said that these were political issues and therefore they had no jurisdiction to get involved. I don't think that this will be any different. One of the things that MAGA is really good about is they always want to put on a show. So it's like, grabbing people off the streets. That's about putting on a show. Doing things like, oh, we're going to kick you out of office is about putting on a show. I truly believe that not every portion of democracy has failed just yet. And frankly, the only part that hasn't fully kind of succumbed at this point is the courts in general. Any wins that we have experienced on behalf of democracy thus far have been in the courts. And so while I don't necessarily have the utmost faith in all courts, I do know that there is recent precedents specifically about quorum breaking for Texans, as well as I understand that in our Texas Constitution, it specifically allows for a quorum break. So it doesn't make sense. I just don't see this Supreme Court twisting itself into a pretzel just to appease this governor who's trying to appease the president.
What about accusations from the sitting Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, that those who have fled the state, who are members of the legislature, who are Democrats, are accepting bribes to do so, to pay for their expenses?
Listen, now I will tell you that he knows a little something about taking money that he's not supposed to take. I mean, if there's anybody that understands breaking the law, it is definitely the one that was under federal investigation for I don't know how many years and was subject to state felony indictments for close to probably 8 years in the state of Texas. But honestly, we've done quorum breaks before. And again, there's never been anyone that even tried to presume or tried to pretend as if this was bribery. Listen, these are people that are out there. They are working on behalf of their constituents. And when we are not in a regular session in Texas, we are allowed to take donations. We are one of the few states that so long as you're in session, regular session, you're not allowed to take any money. And the reason is because literally lobbyists would come on the floor and drop money historically in Texas to try to get their way. So they changed the law. And so there is nothing illegal about what they're doing. People can donate to them and support them in their advocacy and how it is that they believe that they need to represent for their districts.
On this program last night, Brian Harrison, who is a Republican member of the Texas House, said that the Democrats who have left Texas are hypocrites, his word, not mine, because they fled to Illinois, a deeply gerrymandered state, or they fled to California or New York, deeply Democratic gerrymandered states. So he listed three and said those are representative of flaws in the system that Texas Republicans are just trying to balance in Texas. I'd like your response.
Yeah, listen, I just can't listen to any Republican right now. If you are not a Republican that had a problem with the fact that the U.S. House decided that they would go on recess for an entire month because they did not want to deal with the Epstein files, then you absolutely have no place to speak. Now, I will be honest and tell you that there were some Republicans, mostly on the federal level, that absolutely said in a very bipartisan way that they believed in the transparency and they believed that these files should absolutely be turned over to us. So all of a sudden, you want to talk about this? It's the same thing with Congressman Kiley, who all of a sudden wants to file a bill saying, hey, we can't do mid-decade redistricting only because he believes that he's on the chopping block in California if California does what they're saying that they're going to do. So here's the deal. Time out for Democrats just sitting there and being the bigger person and absolutely doing the moral thing, the right thing, when Republicans are playing with a completely different playbook. They don't know how to deal with us actually deciding that we will get on their level. And unfortunately, for the American people, that level is not an uplifting level. Unfortunately, it is very down and dirty. But at the end of the day, we refuse to be anybody's doormat. So I got news for them. I'm not going to let you walk over me, because walking over me means you're walking over and you're stepping on my constituents. And some things are bigger than any titles. And one of those things is absolutely democracy and fighting for it and making sure we do everything to preserve it, even if it means that we got to get in the mud and play the same game that y'all are playing.
Congresswoman Crockett, you gained a lot of attention by being a rather fierce critic of the president. Some of your language in this interview suggests as much. Teddy Roosevelt told us to be in the arena means to be scrutinized and to be criticized. The New York Post has a story today that has a headline that reads, "No-show boss from hell who terrorizes staffers," referring to you. Are you a no-show boss from hell who terrorizes staffers?
Oh my goodness. Listen, I know that I have arrived, honey. That is the way that I see this. Because as Beyonce says, if they're not talking about you, then obviously you must not be doing anything. You know what? This is just more slander, more nonsense, more lies. And honestly, I don't think that the New York Post would probably be the first ones to be able to figure out if I was a boss from hell. I just don't think so. I have happily served on the state level for, I did 2 years there, and now I am at year 2.5 on the federal level. And so 5.5 years in, all of a sudden, I'm this terrible person and terrible boss. Yeah, I don't think so. And ultimately, it wouldn't be the New York Post. Now, here's the reality. It is very difficult to work on the Hill, no matter who you are, whether you're a member, as you and I were joking before we got on camera about all of the scrutiny that comes with being not only woman, but being young and being a Black woman. Yeah, there's a lot of scrutiny that comes my way, and it comes my way from all different angles. But when people start talking about you, that's when you know that you are obviously getting under their skin. So I am not going to give up. There's a song that I like to quote every once in a while. It says, "Your hate is my motivation." So keep hating. All it does is motivate me to continue to do what I do, which is to be loud and proud on behalf of the American people.
Texas Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, I appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
U.S. Army says soldiers saved lives yesterday when shots were fired at Fort Stewart in Georgia. What these service members are saying about those difficult, frantic moments. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for staying with us. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. The White House says Washington, D.C. will see an increased federal law enforcement presence starting as early as tomorrow. It's part of an executive order President Trump signed aimed at increasing public safety. Despite these deployments and their high visibility, D.C. Metro Police data finds violent crime in the District of Columbia is down by 26% so far this year compared to 2024. The Justice Department has hired as a senior advisor someone who faced multiple criminal charges due to his presence at the January 6th Capitol riot. His name is Jared Wise. You can see him in the blue jacket on the left side of your screen yelling at police officers. He's heard in this video calling law enforcement present there, defending the Capitol, Nazis, and yelling, "Kill them." Not just once, but repeatedly. Wise pleaded not guilty, but was never put on trial due to President Trump's pardon. Today, the U.S. Secretary of the Army awarded the soldiers who sprung into action to subdue the suspect and tend to those injured in yesterday's shooting at Fort Stewart in Georgia. Listen.
One of the things that I can say unequivocally is that the fast action of these soldiers under stress and under trauma and under fire absolutely saved lives from being lost.
An active duty sergeant opened fire on other soldiers yesterday, wounding 5. Officials say all are in stable condition and expected to recover. Skylar Henry joins me now from Fort Stewart, Georgia. Skylar, thanks so much. Catch us up on what we learned new today about the soldiers who saved lives, what they did, and anything else related to the suspect.
All right, let's start with the last question first. 28-year-old Cornelius Radford is the suspected gunman who opened fire yesterday morning on Fort Stewart. At last check, he is still at the Liberty County Jail here in Hinesville, Georgia. He is anticipated to be transported to a military detention facility where he will then move through to military court. No word yet on what he is charged with. We do know that he has been questioned and he is still in confinement. As for those soldiers who stepped in, we had the opportunity to speak with several of them earlier today. They were awarded with several medals for their bravery and heroism, literally describing what happened, jumping into action, reverting back to that training that they have done time and time again, not only here at Fort Stewart, but at other bases where they have been stationed, obviously thinking that they would have to use that overseas or in other areas where they may possibly be deployed, never thinking that they would have to use it at the workplace. Take a listen to what some of them told me.
What were you saying to them to try to talk them down?
Just basically the facts of pretty much why he's doing it, and just the fact that, like I said, I just ended up losing my mother and other teammates within my time frame being in. I'm not trying to have it where it ends up being another time of losing somebody else, including him, if that was the case.
I provided aid to 3 individuals, assessing initial injuries and applying pressure to wounds. I'm not saying it's a desensitizing moment, but repetition builds something you're good at. So, you know, when you train and when you train and when you train, this is what you do.
And to reiterate, Major, that's them reverting back to that training, either first aid response or trying to figure out de-escalation tactics. Either way, Brigadier General John Lubis, who is in charge at the base, said that had it not been for what they did, this certainly could have escalated and been much worse.
Training is meant to create calmness under fire, and it did there, just at a very unexpected place. Skylar Henry, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. There are many benefits, perceived and actual, from artificial intelligence. Even so, some cyber criminals are weaponizing it. Next, we'll learn from an expert who will explain to us how these emerging technologies are changing cyber attacks. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Cyber criminals are increasingly using artificial intelligence to expedite what they're trying to accomplish, meaning hack or other things. That is according to the 2025 Threat Hunting Report released this week by a cybersecurity company you might have heard of, CrowdStrike. I sat down with CrowdStrike's Senior Vice President of Counter-Adversary Operations to discuss the report's findings. Listen. Adam, it's great to have you here. It seems like we haven't even gotten to the real positive side of artificial intelligence, and now there's this big downbeat, which is AI in cybercrimes. What have you learned?
Well, look, it goes both ways. There's definitely some upsides to AI, and you can use it for good, but what we're finding is that threat actors are using it for bad, too. So some of the things that we've noted is that e-criminals have used it to speed up their operations, to automate a lot of the things that they're doing when they're trying to run ransomware. We've seen nation-state threat actors using it for really advanced stuff. A lot of people, I think, are familiar with disinformation, misinformation, and how you can use generative AI to make fake videos and fake messages. But we're seeing threat actors use it to avoid detection and to really up-level their operations. So they can use prompts and kind of some of the things that you use Gen AI for every day. They can use that to say, profile this computer and find all the interesting files that I want to steal.
And in cybersecurity, you build walls and layers of walls. If I understand what you're saying, AI can speed up the penetrating process to go through or around those walls.
Yeah, and adversaries are picking it up more and more every single day. So what started off, I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a malware we found for mobile devices, and this malware used generative AI and a technology called optical character recognition to go through all of the pictures on your phone to look for keywords. So if you ever took a picture of a document or ever took a picture in front of a restaurant with a particular name or something like that, the threat actors could map those pictures to those words. And that was something we associated with China.
What about North Korea and generative AI to infiltrate companies here?
Yeah, we're seeing that almost every day, literally. In fact, we saw it in the last 12 months about 320 plus times. And what they're doing is they're using generative AI technology like large language models to create LinkedIn profiles, to create resumes, to make them attractive to recruiters. So the recruiter reaches out and says, hey, I have a perfect job for you. And then when they go onto the interview, they're using generative AI to answer the questions. A lot of times with the technical interview, you have to showcase that you know what you're doing, right? You have to do a test or something like that. And one of the interesting things we've seen is that sometimes the person will be talking and their hands will be up, and they'll also be typing on the screen that they're sharing with the recruiter because somebody else is using generative AI to answer the question while they're talking. And then we found deepfake technology, so changing their actual appearance during a video interview so that they look like somebody different than who they are. And then ultimately, when they get that job, they use generative AI to do the job so that they can hold 10, 20, 30 jobs at a time, getting full-time salaries, and then use generative AI to do an entire day's worth of work in minutes and never get caught.
So forgive me if I'm confused. Is this not just a cybersecurity problem, it's an HR problem?
100%, yes. Absolutely. And in fact, we've had to embrace a lot of the HR teams out there and talk to them about how to detect this. You know, some interesting...
Because they've got to be saying to you, what are you talking about? What?
Yeah.
Go down the hall to my cyber folks.
Exactly.
And you're like, no, it's in your place.
Yeah, you have to be on the lookout. And we've talked to them about just some simple tests. For example, you know, if you ask the candidate to touch their face, if they're using deepfake technology, that'll glitch. They'll be in, you know, some sort of artifact. And so if they touch their face, you can or change the light, right? As the light changes, it causes the face to glitch. So we have to train the HR team to actually be on the lookout as kind of the leading indicator that this is potentially a North Korean that's trying to get employment.
What about Russia and Iran? They're also frequently name-checked in cyber threat literature.
Yeah, so Iran has a slightly different kind of approach where we've seen them use Gen AI to reach out. A lot of what they like to do is to find an interesting target and then reach out to them on social media. And so they'll use generative AI to make a profile or make a persona that looks like somebody that you'd want to talk to, right? So they use it, you know, a lot of times they were targeting troops that were deployed, you know, overseas, and they would put on, you know, the appearance of an attractive person to that target, and then try to reach out to them and be like, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And just total fake person that this person was talking to. And with Russia, we've seen them integrate into their malware generative AI. In fact, there was just a case where a malicious program or malware was actually reaching out to an LLM, and this is how they avoided detection, right? So when we look for malicious files, we're looking for things that give away what it's trying to do, right? Maybe there's a keyword or something in there. So rather than have keywords or have the program built in, it reaches out to the generative AI and it says, profile the system, or find all the files that are on this and put them into a directory and zip them up so I can exfiltrate them out. So the adversaries are increasingly advancing with this.
30 seconds, I know that's tough. AI can fight AI in this space.
Yes. Yeah, so one of the things that we like to do is to bring the same technology that the adversaries are using to lower the bar for the defenders and to make it more efficient for them, because one of the biggest challenges is that defenders have to be right 100% of the time. Right. The adversary only has to get lucky once. And so the same technology, we have something called Charlotte AI, which enables defenders to be much more efficient and to operate at scale to meet these threat actors, you know, as soon as they make access.
Adam Myers, fascinating stuff. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Great being here.
You probably recall the soap opera between President Trump and Elon Musk. When we come back, we're going to talk about the money plot twist in that soap opera. That's next. This is The Takeout. I'm glad you're here. Several Democratic lawmakers are trying to stop DOJ employees from moving into permanent positions in the federal government. They've written a strongly worded letter about this. And joining me now to discuss, CBS News political contributors Joel Payne and Terry Sullivan. Joel is a Democrat, Terry is a Republican, but you both know the utter uselessness of strongly worded letters in Washington, D.C.
I don't know, Major. Strongly worded letter. That'll at least get a committee to start looking into something. Look, obviously,
especially if there are co-signers to this letter.
Yes,
look,
exactly.
Democrats, this is a thing that they've been fighting, is the impotence of the little bit of power that they have. I do think Democrats are getting better at using the bully pulpit. I don't think that this per se is the best way to do it. I do think it's a good way to highlight DOJ, the unpopularity of what DOJ did, and keeping that story in the public zeitgeist. So I think that it's a good attempt to keep that in the public zeitgeist, but obviously very little forcing mechanism in a strongly worded letter.
We're going to skip over that because I know you believe the same thing, Terry. Strongly worded letters go nowhere in this town, just like commission reports.
Right.
So let's go back to what Joel was referring to obliquely, which is Doge, Elon Musk, boogeyman for Democrats, okay? So that sort of subsided when there was this soap opera between him and the president. But Washington always reminds us to follow the money, especially when there's all sorts of soap opera things that might be obscuring what's actually happening. And what was happening during that very public spat, Elon Musk strokes a check of $5 million to the Trump super PAC and checks of $5 million to the super PAC supporting House Republicans and Senate Republicans. Terry, break that down for us.
Yeah, $5 million to Elon Musk is absolutely nothing.
Right.
So
it falls out of his pockets easily.
Right.
But it's still real money for those committees.
It's still real money for those committees. Look, I think he is clearly right of center in his views, conservative views. The Republican Party is the closest thing to that right now. And it's not necessarily at odds with his thinking of, like, we might need a third party to hold these people to accountable, especially on things like spending. And so it fits in.
Joel, does that make it easier for Democrats to re-boogeyman Elon?
Probably not quite as easy as it was when he was the most notable public employee of the Trump administration that was doing all the bad stuff. Listen, I think that what Elon Musk is trying to do is keep out of the crosshairs of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has threatened him on, at least 3 or 4 occasions in the last 3 months. Elon Musk has a vested interest in staying on the right side of Donald Trump. I think it's as simple as that.
If you think Elon Musk is easily intimidated or is overly worried about if the President of the United States is mad at him, you're not paying
intimidated,
attention.
but incentivized. I do think he's incentivized to stay on Donald Trump's good side.
I talked about something else that popped today. The president suggested very strongly something he tried to do his first term, which is redo the census and do it in a way that does not count undocumented persons in this country. The Constitution is very clear on this. Persons in this country need to be counted for purposes of a census. Terry?
You know, let's let the lawyers be lawyers on this. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody...
this is a MAGA-based appeal.
Right. No. But what I'm saying is that common sense should tell us that if you are here illegally, maybe you shouldn't have the right, and I'm going to guess Joel may disagree with this, but you shouldn't have the right to pick the leaders of this country. That does seem kind of common sense. I understand the point, but I do think sometimes we just have to, like,
But
pull
that
back.
implies that they vote, and they don't.
They don't.
They
They can't.
But
Literally,
the fact,
they can't.
but I understand, but it does give disproportionate weighting to those districts where they are having.
Joel, jump in.
Yeah. This is about clarity. The clarity of the Republican MAGA project right now is redefining what an American is. This is part and parcel with that attempt. They are challenging birthright citizenship. They are trying to challenge who they think belongs in this country. They're pulling people out of TSA lines and looking at their phone history to see what they search and what they believe in. They're kicking kids off of college campuses. Yeah. They are trying to redefine citizenship in this country. The American people will have several opportunities this year, next year, and beyond.
Terry, to Joel's point, Joe Rogan has said some of those very same things recently.
No, I understand. There's some points that he's made that are valid. A lot of these, though, kicking kids off of college campuses, yes, who incite riots, who attack other students, who take over libraries, and
those things happened, and those things are definitely in the crosshairs of this administration. But also, people who've written op-eds they didn't like also fell into that.
They don't
category.
Like people who disagree with them. Donald Trump is trying to tell you: you study what I tell you to study. You watch what I tell you to watch. You believe what I tell you to believe. Now, if you like that, if Republicans like that, then this is their guy.
It's not a right to come here. It is a privilege to come here and visit our country and to get a visa to come to our country. And it is up to whoever's running the country to decide.
It's a right to be represented and counted, though, and that's
you're changing things, though. We're talking about 2 different things here.
Right. Very quickly. Yes or no? Texas redistricting fight will benefit Republicans or Democrats net?
Neither.
I think it will allow Democrats to actually get into the fight and not disarm.
Joel Payne, Terry Sullivan, I appreciate it as always. Thank you. Buy now, pay later. It's not how I got my furniture, but forget about that. The do's and don'ts of this practice as Americans remain concerned about the economy and its direction. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Here are some scenarios. It's movie night, or you're hangry, or maybe you're going to make an online purchase. And when you go to pay for any of those things, you see an option that says pay in installments. Well, this is a growing practice known as buy now, pay later. Senior industry analyst at Bankrate, Ted Rossman, joins me now. Ted, we saw a poll recently that said 29% of Americans use buy now, pay later. 17% use it for medical or dental care. And it's mostly favored by those younger than 45, which quite obviously does not include me.
Yeah, we're talking here about installment lending. Companies like Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna. The pitch used to be 4 interest-free payments over 6 weeks. It's evolved a lot in recent years. A lot of these plans are now lasting longer, maybe 6 months or a year or even a few years. What I find a bit ironic is that for an industry that's portrayed itself as the anti-credit card or the kinder, gentler financing method, a lot of those longer plans do charge interest. Maybe it's 15%, 20%. Sometimes it's even over 30%. Some people are getting into trouble here. I mean, to be fair, the same thing can happen with credit cards. It's interesting, though, how the lines are blurring. Also, this used to be exclusively an online concept. It's moved into the physical retail world as well.
Ted, I was reading about this and I came across something called the flypaper effect. Are you familiar with that term? It means basically these buy now, pay later methods increase consumerism in certain lower price goods beyond what people would ordinarily pay.
Well, Klarna, for example, has a partnership with DoorDash now where you can finance orders over $35. Some people view that as a bit of a sign of the payments apocalypse. You know, we're financing burritos over 6 weeks. Is that really a wise financial decision? There are certainly detractors. Proponents would say it's a viable way to spread out your cash flow. You know, whether it's a fast food order or maybe it's a bigger ticket item, maybe it's a couch or a refrigerator, or maybe it's new clothes. People are using this for groceries and gas, and they're using it for just about everything nowadays. I think the best use case is to partition a single large expense. You pay $50 a month for that exercise bike or couch or refrigerator. To me, that makes more sense than the daily transaction thing, but to each their own. I mean, credit card debt is a persistent problem. The average American has more than $6,000 in credit card debt. The average interest rate is 20%. Some people are drawn to buy now, pay later as an alternative, either because they can't get a credit card or because they like the installment focus. They like knowing exactly how much they owe for exactly how long with buy now, pay later.
Does this affect credit scores?
It's going to start affecting credit scores in the fall with a few caveats. FICO, the big credit scoring company, announced that this fall they're going to start supporting buy now, pay later. Now, not all lenders are reporting this information. Affirm has been a leader. Others like Afterpay and Klarna are more skeptical. The other thing is that it's partially reliant on these companies actually furnishing information. But the other thing is lenders have to upgrade to the latest and greatest FICO technology to even see this. Many have not. It's going to be slow going. One of the reasons people are drawn to this is it's easier to get. It's largely outside of the traditional credit scoring system. For better or for worse, that's probably going to continue. One downside is that responsible use is not usually helping boost your score. In the long run, I think more inclusion would be a good thing, but it's going to take a while to get there.
I got 20 seconds or less, Ted. Are delinquency rates going up in this space?
They're not bad. It's really surprising. People have been warning about it for years, but companies like Affirm actually report lower delinquency rates than credit cards. They tout proprietary underwriting and the fact that people like this and they want to stay in the good graces and keep using it.
At 20 seconds precisely, Ted Rossman, I thank you for that and much more. That's it for today. Please stick around. The Daily Report, it starts right now on CBS News 24/7.